Hello, this is Andrea Widberg, and welcome to another podcast. I've discovered I tend to do these when there's so many things I want to write about and only one space left at American Thinker in which to write them. So without further ado, let me swing right into things. One of the things I pointed out in a post at American Thinker after Kamala gave her concession speech was how she went out of her way to focus on the fact that she was supporting a peaceful transition after an election, as if she hadn't basically called Trump Hitler, and frankly, nobody would do a peaceful transition to Hitler, but heated rhetoric, campaign, etc. And what I noted is that by having screamed about insurrection, Democrats have locked themselves in a box where they can't protest election results. Now, having said that, it doesn't mean that all Democrats feel locked in a box, and that gets us to what's happening in Bucks County, Pennsylvania, where there is a long and illegal count going on. There are a lot of long counts going on across America. California is days away and boasts how patient and taking its time is. And what we notice every time there's a long count is that it always works in Democrats' favor. This has been going on for decades. When there's a long count, Democrats win because the long count is basically intended to ensure a Democrat victory. So what's happening in Pennsylvania is normative, but it's different in Bucks County, where the Democrats are still trying to eke out a win in the Senate for the Democrat Bob Casey as opposed to the Republican Dave McCormick. Bucks is an area north of Philadelphia. It's the fourth most populous county in Pennsylvania. So what it does matters. It's incredibly white, over 86% white, has a very low poverty rate, and since 1992, it has sent Democrats to the White House. Although here's where it gets interesting, that's always by very slender margins. The voter registration in this election was about 41% for both D's and R's, with independents and third parties making up the difference. Obama's election victory in 2008 was the highest percentage win for a Democrat since 1992, and he only got slightly under 54% of the votes. Let me try English here. But in Bucks County itself, 2 out of 3 county commissioners are Democrats, and that's where you get to see them red of tooth and claw and completely disinclined to abide by the law. What you need to know is that in a series of legal rulings and refusals to rule on lower courts' rulings, the Pennsylvania Supreme Court earlier this year effectively held that absentee ballots that are sent in without signatures and dates on the envelopes can be rejected. It is not unconstitutional to demand at a minimum that voters fill out the envelopes correctly. In Bucks County, the deputy solicitor has said, yeah, that's the law. Any of those improperly completed ballots can't be counted. But that's not how the commissioners feel. And here's the most brazen quotation you will ever hear from a Democrat politician. The county chair, Diane Ellis Marceglia, or Marcellia, whatever, stated, I think we all know that precedent by a court doesn't matter anymore in this country. People violate laws anytime they want. So for me, if I violate this law, it's because I want a court to pay attention. There's nothing more important than counting votes. End quote. Of course, what she means is counting Democrat votes. And I too want a court to pay attention to her violating the law because it would be nice if she paid a consequence. Very often Democrats don't. That's a two-tiered system in our country. When Democrats commit political crimes, even including burning Minneapolis or setting a Portland courthouse on fire, they get a pass. But the most amazing thing about this, and it goes back to the point I made at the beginning of this little commentary about Democrats having locked themselves in a box by having made such a thing about Trump protesting election results, is the take from the Washington Post editorial board. No fooling, Washington Post. And I'm going to quote here. Before the November 5th election, Pennsylvania's Supreme Court ruled that provisional ballots must be signed in 2 required places and that mail-in votes must be dated. Yet elected Democratic officials in Philadelphia and 3 other counties, Bucks, Center, and Montgomery, voted this week to defy these and other court decisions at the request of lawyers for Democratic Senator Bob Casey, who trails GOP challenger Dave McCormick by about 24,000 votes, with almost all of the roughly 7 million votes cast having been counted. So far, that's an accurate statement of the facts and a very good one. Here's where it gets interesting. Again, let me remind you that this is the WAPO. These Democrats' decisions will almost certainly be overturned on appeal, but the mere attempt to defy judicial rulings is corrosive to democracy and invites similar behavior in future elections. At this point, they quote that county commissioner who was saying the law doesn't apply to me, and then they say, quote, "There's hypocrisy on both sides of this dispute. This is politics after all, but it is irrelevant to the legal merits. Mr. Mejia and other county officials do not get to decide whether a legal requirement is quote-unquote material and must be followed. Courts do, and they have spoken clearly. Thus saith the Washington Post editorial board." There may be one other thing going on, not just their having locked themselves in a box. Amongst saner people, there may be a sigh of relief and a desperate desire to return to normalcy. Normalcy in elections, where counting is done quickly and efficiency. Normalcy in the social scene, where gender-crazed activists aren't taking over institutions. Normalcy in everything. So that may be what's going on. But on the one hand, you have blatant abuse of the law by a Democrat determined to win. And on the other hand, you have the WAPO saying, just let it be. Let the Republican win. We need to get back to normal. Quite amazing. One of the more amusing things we're witnessing now that the election is over is the exodus of famous people from X, Elon Musk's platform. So I consolidated 3 of the recent ones. I have some quotations. The Guardian, the British newspaper, has left. Now, the Guardian, to its credit, unlike American papers, has never made any secret about its left-wing bona fides. So anyway, I thought it was worth reading part of its short essay about why it's left. "We think that the benefits of being on X are now outweighed by the negatives and that resources could be better used promoting our journalism elsewhere. This is something we have been considering for a while, given the often disturbing content promoted or found on the platform, including far-right conspiracy theories and racism. The U.S. presidential election campaign served only to underline what we have considered for a long time, that X is a toxic media platform and that its owner, Elon Musk, has been able to use its influence to, dun dun dun, shape political discourse." Close quote. The View's Sunny Hostin, who went hysterically racist when Trump won the election, blaming white women, also has left X. The Daily Mail writes, "The View star Sunny Hostin has deleted her X account in what she describes as a patriotic protest against owner Elon Musk. The talk show host told the Behind the Table podcast that Musk had made the platform worse. She said, Elon Musk took it over and I feel like he ruined it. Black Twitter was a thing that I loved and it was sort of replaced with misogyny and racism. And the last person I highlighted was MSNBC's Joy Reid, who's also leaving over Musk. So she's according to a news account, MSNBC personality Joy Reid deleted her X account Thursday, making her the latest major figure to leave the social media website. And what she said was, quote, "The reason for doing it and kissing goodbye my 1.9 million followers is because I haven't been posting for a long time. I just didn't want to be contributing content once it was purchased by its present owner." Are you noticing a theme here? if you are noticing, yes, Max, my dog has things to say. If you are noticing a theme, it is that Elon Musk owning the site outrages these people. The fact that Elon Musk is not shaping the discourse, but is instead allowing users to shape the discourse simply by publishing content, doesn't seem to affect them. As far as they're concerned, Elon Musk is a bad guy. What's interesting is they never felt that way about Jack Dorsey or Mark Zuckerberg or any of the other tech titans who used their money and censorship to control political discourse in a Democrat direction. Others who have left the platform for basically the same reason are Stephen King, Barbara Streisand, Jamie Lee Curtis, Don Lemon, or Lemon, or however he calls himself, and Bette Midler. The best quotation is from Don Lemon. Again, keep in mind that what Elon Musk did was stop censorship on the site. I actually stopped posting at the site for almost a decade, maybe longer, because I was constantly getting censored and sent to jail and having posts deleted. It's the same reason I stopped posting anything at Facebook. I was getting censored. And what Don Lemon said was, I once believed it was a place for honest debate and discussion, transparency, and dun, 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 free speech. But now I feel it does not deserve that purpose. So free speech to leftists means their speech, not your speech. And in fact, a young leftist, that's my dog wheezing in the background. He's got asthma, among other things. A young leftist said to me, I totally believe in free speech, but the government needs to monitor misinformation. So there you have it. Free speech for me, but not for thee. One of the cool things about women is that their entire biological makeup is directed toward having babies. They have the eggs get implanted, if they're fertilized, get implanted in the uterus, an umbilical cord attaches to the mother's entire body chemistry changes to feed the baby, her skeletal structure changes to feed the baby. Once the baby is born, she starts lactating, and the milk she produces changes according to the baby's stage of development, whether it's a newborn or later in the process. It is all an amazing and natural cycle. Men cannot do this. It is not part of their biology. They have other amazing biology, but they can't breastfeed. Now, it used to be in America that even women were discouraged from breastfeeding. My sister was born in 1956 in a hospital in the Midwest, and my mother, a European, expected to breastfeed the baby. And she was told, first of all, that while the nurse could touch the newborn baby, my mother couldn't because mommy has germs. And the other thing she was told is, no, do not breastfeed your baby. Your milk is much less good than the product from the factory. And so my sister was fed on formula. By the time I was born in San Francisco, my mother had a more progressive doctor back in the day when progressive actually meant some good things. And he said, what do you think your boobs are for? What do you think the milk is for? And so she nursed me. And it was also in 1956, the year my sister was born, that 7 women in Illinois created the Leche League, which was intended to encourage women to use what God or nature gave them to feed their babies. One of the founders, and she was also the first president for 24 years, was a woman named Marion Thompson. I'll get back to her. Since its founding, the Leche League, and certainly when I had my children, was dedicated to helping women breastfeed. And especially as women get older, the process becomes harder. It's a lot easier to do things when you're an unthinking 18-year-old than when you're a very serious and much older woman. And that's what I was told in the hospital. They said, the young'uns, it's easy. The old ones, they always have trouble. 2 years ago, however, things really started to change. I shouldn't say 2 years ago. I started noticing it 2 years ago. And this went along with the whole transgender movement. And what started being said was that so-called trans women should have the joy of breastfeeding the babies that either their partners give birth to or that they adopt at birth from often women who essentially sell their bodies and sell the babies. And the Academy of Breastfeeding Medicine went right along with that. It has suggested that hospitals and lactation consultants add the phrase father's milk to their working vocabulary, which presumably refers to trans men, which means women who have identify as men and have given birth. Other words that should be part of the vocabulary are chest feeding, human milk feeding, and lactating person, all to use in place of traditional terms such as mother or woman. And for some time now, these trans women, that is men, have been trying to breastfeed babies by using hormones to create a milky substance that is excreted from their breasts. And apparently it superficially seems to be milk, but there have been no studies on it. It turns out that the Leche League is on board with all of this. At its website, Leche International, it's dedicated a page to transgender and non-binary parents, and I'm quoting here, "Trans men, trans women, and non-binary individuals may choose to breastfeed or chest feed their babies. You do not need to have given birth to breastfeed or chest feed, as we can also see in the experiences of those nursing adopted babies." Now, often that's done simply by taking formula or even breast milk and kind of taping a bottle to you and just holding the baby to you so the baby is skin to skin, which is good for babies, and yeah, that's fine. It's babies being touched while they're nursing really matters. But then it goes on. Trans women can use a protocol similar to adoptive and other non-gestational mothers and stimulate their milk supply. Now, when they say adopted and other non-gestational mothers, I'm assuming they're talking about biological women who've used some hormones to stimulate milk supply. But anyway, going back to La Leche, it is called the Newman-Goldfarb Protocol. You can read more here, and a number of different protocols, and they also have an article about breastfeeding without giving birth. And then they say trans feminine nursing parents may also need to take the hormone spironolactone to suppress their testosterone. So basically, we have no idea what's going into these babies. It's an experiment. It hasn't been studied. It's like the pill. It has political connotations, and nobody wants to look at what's really happening to human bodies. And for those who don't know, my theory about the pill is that one of the reasons we're having so many people who are gender confused is that although they are biologically absolutely one sex or the other, when their mothers went off the pill, the women got pregnant before the pill had fully left their bodies. It takes up to 2 years. And so the infants had interesting hormonal washes. And the logical thing when you have a biological man whose hormonal wash was a bit too much estrogen would be to feed him testosterone so that he can be fully male, rather than leave him in a physical no man's land of pumping estrogen into him while his body is biologically male. Be that as it may, the news that I want to talk about is Marian Thompson, one of the founders and the first president, and she sent an open letter to the Leche League. On November 6, 2024, I resigned from the Leche League International Board of Directors and from the Leche League itself, an organization that has become a travesty of my original intent. From an organization with the specific mission of supporting biological women who want to give their babies the best start in life by breastfeeding them, Leche League's focus has subtly shifted to include men who, for whatever reason, want to have the experience of breastfeeding despite no careful long-term research on male lactation and how that may affect the baby. This shift from following the norms of nature, which is the core of mothering through breastfeeding, to indulging the fantasies of adults is destroying our organization. Despite my efforts these past 2 years as a board member, it has become clear that there is nothing I can do to change this trajectory by staying involved. Still, I leave the door open to come back when the Leche League returns to its original mission and purpose. I thank each of you for your years of making this world a healthier and happier place by being there for all mothers needing help with breastfeeding their babies. With much love, Marian Thompson, founder of the Leche League. Very strong email. This is a story that should have gotten more attention, but I believe that this is the kind of thing that helps explain why Donald Trump won the election. People want to go back to the norm. You cannot run a country based on fringe people and behaviors. A country's stability, its ballast, comes from the norm. And the norm is biological reality. The norm is borders. The norm is strong national security. The norm is improving life and the economy for the greatest number of people. The norm is not controlled by micro-examining people's skin color, sexual preferences, fetishes, mental illnesses. All of those belong at the fringe. People's skin color and sex, they should be treated exactly the same under the law and accorded the respect of all human beings. And people's, because those are people, things over which they have no control, and I'm forgetting the word, but people's behaviors, people's obsessions, fads, fetishes, if they're fringy, they belong on the fringe. And sometimes they can be respected, and sometimes they deserve to be absolutely rejected and ridiculed. As I look at the scene in America, whether it's the illegal aliens coming in or what's going on the left, I keep coming back to what Donald Trump said during the 2016 campaign, and he was speaking about illegal aliens coming to America. He said, they're not sending their best. And he was talking about the rapists and murderers and child molesters and other unsavory people who come in. Not their best. Well, it turns out the same is true when it comes to our own deep state. And by that I mean the administrative state. By that I mean the unconstitutional administrative state, which is filled with a permanent body of people who have enormous power over our lives, and they operate according to regulations that the legislature did not pass, and they themselves are unelected and unaccountable and protected by unions, which give them better pay and benefits than ordinary Americans and make them almost impossible to fire. So with that in mind, here's what Andy Ngo had to say. A far-left radical who has online posts suggesting support for Antifa extremism was outed by internet sleuths as a Secret Service agent. He deleted his account, EndOn40, after his identity and name was posted. The Secret Service agent is a fan of Portland Antifa propagandist and disinfo influencer Robert Evans. He posts regularly on Evans' subreddit. The agent says he feels dejected about the incoming Trump administration and would like to go work for the ACLU or SPLC, which is the Southern Poverty Law Center. And speaking of that, Ngo continues, one of the Southern Poverty Law Center's staffers in Atlanta is a suspect in a RICO and domestic terrorism case involving violent attacks by Antifa-linked extremists. And I won't read to you the two messages that Andy Ngo has tweeted from the Secret Service guy. Suffice to say that it's not just that he sort of supports Antifa. Instead, he admits to having been a hard-boiled leftist in college, calls himself full and red and black, which means Antifa, and he got sucked into law enforcement and now works for a prestigious agency, which of course is the Secret Service, and he hates his job. He calls Trump a Nazi for wanting to enforce the law regarding illegal immigration. He rants about Project 2025. This is both shocking and, sadly, the norm. We've seen repeatedly that the executive branch of government has become ideologically corrupt. I mean, just look at Peter Strzok, and who was completely happy with suggesting that he would affect the outcome of the 2016 election, and they quite effectively did. It now appears that Barack Obama was behind the Russian hoax and was trying to get Trump out of office, actively trying to do so. I mean, I can just go on and on and on and on. What's really disturbing about this guy is that he is in the Secret Service. These people protect the president, and if they're more like him, it may explain what happened in Butler and what happened down at Mar-a-Lago. I want the Secret Service to be sea green incorruptible. I want them to be absolutely above partisan politics, and I don't care who's in the White House, because when an American president is elected, that goes to the core of America's stability. It is a complete disaster. It is a repudiation of our constitutional democratic republic. And to have people like this in the Secret Service is terrifying, and you have to wonder, is he alone? I suspect he's not, because we've seen the rot. A very depressing report has come out of the United Kingdom. I'm going to start with a little history. If you follow my Bookworm Room blog, every Friday I run a meme edition, and in most meme editions I have a segment called White Privilege. And these are images showing the sheer awfulness of people's lives in the pre-modern era. And I call it white privilege because I want to make the point that much as blacks like to think that they have a monopoly on suffering in Western culture, the reality is that in the old days, everybody suffered in Western culture. Only a minute percentage of people at the very top had decent lives. What changed that was capitalism, the free market, and individual liberty. That same change saw the end of slavery because slavery was no longer economically smart, and people who were dedicated to liberty realized that it was fundamentally evil. And one could argue that in the very old days, when white people were dying like flies because nobody cared about them, at least slaves had a market value, so their owners, even though they were engaged in a morally despicable act, wanted to keep them alive. I know that's not meant to support slavery. It's just meant to point out that the old days were really, really bad for everyone. And one of the things that you notice, especially in pictures of children in the streets of London and other English city slums, is how unbelievably filthy and ragged they are. Same was true for pictures from the 19th century of kids on the streets of New York and other major cities. Filth was the norm. And this was an era, there was no Walmart, there was no factory clothing. People owned one or two outfits if they were lucky, and they certainly had no running water. They had no ability to clean themselves and certainly not to clean their clothes. Well, England has gone crazy on net zero, the climatista demand that this country with tens of millions of people have a carbon output that is equal to zero, that it is net zero. And what that means is that people can't have fireplaces, and energy prices, of course, have skyrocketed. So what you get from What's Up With That is a report out of England. It's Hygiene, Poverty, the Brutal Reality of Life in Net Zero Britain. And what it says is that in the more impoverished parts of the UK, parents are sending their children to school in dirty clothes because they lack the money to do both laundry and heat their homes. So the schools are trying to step in and wash the clothes for the children so that the children don't smell. And I will say, I seem to recall watching something on streaming TV where one of the appliance companies is boasting that it donates money or appliances to schools so that they can wash clothes for impoverished children. When Donald Trump brings energy prices down, there'll be less of that. People will be able to buy washing machines or have washing machines in their apartment buildings or afford to go to laundromats. But right now what we're seeing is the retreat from the modern, and people are discovering that the pre-modern was really stinky. It's not a pretty movie or TV show of gracious people living in beautiful homes in Jane Austen's era when you had a bazillion servants doing all the hard work for you and keeping you clean and keeping you clothed. Life was short, ugly, brutish, and very dirty. Thank you so much for listening. I will be back when I have something more I want to say.